Hi guys and welcome back to Irony Completed. Awkward left-handed wave there. What the... who knows. So in about 3 weeks time I will be graduating from my English and Film Studies degree, and I realised that I barely ever talk about film studies on this channel, and I do have a fair few videos about film, and I used to talk about films a lot in my favourites videos, but I just haven't lately, and I don't know why, because film is still one of the biggest passions in my life, honestly. Today I thought I would talk about some of my favourite films, but specifically some of my favourite documentary films. Documentaries are some of my favourite types of films to watch just generally, and I think that it's sad that people have this like misconception of them as something really boring. I wanted to talk to you guys today about some of my favourite documentary films and why they're my favourites. It's a top 5 list, and I'm going to call it a top 5 list, but there are actually 6 on here. I've just grouped 2 of them together, and a lot of the ones I'm talking about, not all of them, but I think 4 out of the 6 of them are on Netflix. So I'm going to start with the 2 that are grouped together, and the reason I'm grouping them together is because they kind of follow on from one another. One of them is Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, and then there is a kind of sequel to that documentary which is called Aileen, Selling of a Serial Killer. And both of these are by the documentarian Nick Broomfield, who is actually one of my favourite documentary filmmakers. I love him. He's up there with Louis Theroux for me, but we'll get to Louis Theroux in a little bit. Both Aileen films are all about Aileen Wuornos, who is quite famous for being America's first female serial killer. I actually think she probably wasn't America's first female serial killer, because I've heard a lot about, like, in early America and stuff there were, you know, women who killed people, and I doubt that she's like the first ever, but she is the most famous female serial killer in American history, probably. I would highly recommend checking out both of these documentaries, and I'll also link below a YouTube video by Rob Dyke about Aileen Wuornos, which is absolutely brilliant if you want to have like a quick overview of it before you decide whether or not to watch the films. Basically, Life and Death of a Serial Killer documents Aileen's trials and the convictions that she got for the murders that she committed, and Selling of a Serial Killer documents her appeal process and how her life was kind of sensationalized and sold to the press by the people in her life who she trusted and claimed to love her. Like I said, I will link a video down below that kind of explains Aileen Wuornos in more detail, but basically she committed a series of robberies and murders. It was a hitchhiking prostitute, and she would pick up men and then shoot them and then rob them at the same time with her girlfriend Tyra Moore. Tyra Moore? I think that's right. Anyway, I'm not doing it any justice at all, which is why I recommend you either watch the documentaries or at least watch the video that I've linked. But basically, in her appeals process and after the trial, there was a lot of debate about whether she killed these men in self-defense, which is what she claimed in her first trials, or whether she just killed them in cold blood, which is what she later claimed. And basically, the second documentary just documents her appeals process and her deteriorating mental state, and like I said, the kind of people in her life who were trying to exploit her and profit off her crimes. I would definitely recommend watching them in order, with Life and Death first and then Selling of a Serial Killer second, but both of them are absolutely worth watching. They are brilliant films, especially if you're into kind of true crime and that kind of thing. The second documentary that I want to talk about is Bowling for Columbine, which was directed by Michael Moore, and basically this is exploring America's gun problem, or specifically America's problem with like school shootings and mass shootings. This documentary is especially interesting because Michael Moore is actually a member of the NRA and is like a lifelong member of the NRA, so he's not necessarily like anti-gun, but he goes to Columbine and he talks to some of the pupils who knew the 2 teenage boys who were involved in it. He also explores a school shooting in Flint, Michigan, where a 6-year-old boy shot a 6-year-old girl at school, which Flint, Michigan is actually Michael Moore's hometown. Also speaks to Charlton Heston, who is the like head of the NRA, like the publicity person for the NRA. He speaks to 2 people who were physically disabled in the Columbine shootings. There's a lot of news footage from school shootings. He visits different countries and asks them why he thinks America has a gun problem, and he kind of explores every avenue of the gun problem in America. That's why I think it's a really interesting documentary, because a lot of the times you feel like documentaries like this have an agenda one way or the other. They're either extremely pro-gun or extremely anti-gun, and I feel like in this documentary you really get the sense that he has conflicting feelings about the whole like gun issue, and it's a really like open discussion, and I feel like he leaves a lot of avenues open. But it's definitely worth checking out. There's some really cool appearances from like famous people that he talks to. Marilyn Manson appears in it, so does one of the creators of South Park, and it is a really, like I said, just interesting discussion of a documentary, especially if you are, again, interested in true crime or interested in learning more about mass shootings and why they happen. Falling for Columbine is actually also on Netflix now, so I would definitely recommend checking it out on there. And there are loads more Michael Moore documentaries and Nick Broomfield documentaries actually on Netflix, which I would recommend checking out all of them if you can, because both of them are such good filmmakers. The next film that I want to talk about is My Scientology Film by Louis Theroux. As I said, Louis Theroux has a place in my heart. No context, Louis Theroux is easily my favourite Twitter page, probably ever. It's brilliant. If you don't follow it, you should. Louis Theroux is also a documentarian who, a lot of his work is on Netflix, but My Scientology documentary isn't, or My Scientology Film isn't, I don't think. Basically, it is him casting and like directing a film about Scientology. So he's trying to make a like fictionalized movie that is like based on true events that have happened within Scientology and within the like higher up ranks of Scientology. This is a really interesting film just to see how hard the Church of Scientology tries to stop him from making the film. This film isn't a film about Scientology, it is him trying to make a film about Scientology, which I find so interesting, because I feel like it's a really kind of like honest style of documentary making, where it kind of documents the whole process and all the kind of like trials that befall him during it. I'm not saying that it's an honest documentary. That's a debate in itself, whether documentaries can become completely like fact based, 100% true, 100% honest, whatever. I'm not getting into that, but I think that the style of documentary filmmaking is really interesting because it kind of documents the journey. If you're a massive fan of Louis Theroux but you haven't seen this for some reason, you should definitely watch it. It's absolutely brilliant. Also, if you're just interested in like cults and the Church of Scientology more generally, it's really interesting just to find out the details of what goes on, because it is such a secretive organisation. So it's definitely one that I would recommend. It's absolutely mind-blowing, and there are some really like funny quips back and forth when Louis is being threatened by various Scientology members. It's absolutely brilliant. Definitely recommend. I'm looking at my phone because I wrote down everything. The next film that I want to talk about is Blackfish by Gabriela Cowperthwaite. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her surname. This is probably one of the most famous documentaries and one of the most watched documentaries. It's also on Netflix, and basically it's about Tilikum, the killer whale that was at SeaWorld, and it's basically more generally all about the immoral and unethical practices that SeaWorld partakes in. It's one of the documentaries that actually made me want to go vegan, even though it's not specifically about veganism. It's more about like animal cruelty and not exploiting animals. But this one is just so heart-wrenching. It's really upsetting. SeaWorld is an absolutely disgusting organisation, and I would never ever support them or go there or visit, because it's just so wrong and evil what they're doing. But if you are a little bit more uneducated, or you don't really know why SeaWorld is evil but you've been hearing people talking about it a lot, this is the documentary to watch. It just goes into so much detail about what they do and about why that is harmful to the animals that they have in their parks, and it's just a documentary that I would definitely recommend, even though, like I said, it's quite famous and well known, so you've probably seen it already. But if you haven't, you should watch it. And then the last documentary that I want to talk about is Gimme Shelter, which is by the Maisel brothers. And the Maisel brothers had this like cinema verite style of making documentaries, so they're not really in it as much as any of the filmmakers or, you know, whatever in the other documentaries I'm talking about. But this is about the Rolling Stones, and it kind of documents them on their tour and then up to this big free show they did, and I can't remember where exactly it was they did the free show. I'll like have it on the screen, but they did this big like free concert, and basically someone was stabbed to death by the Hells Angels at this concert, and it kind of documents the lead up to that and then the aftermath that that had for the Rolling Stones. I studied it at A-level actually, which is so long ago. My film teacher said to me that this was this and like the Manson family kind of ended the like hazy dream of the 60s, because it kind of snapped the spell of the hippie dream and stuff. It's a really, really interesting one. It's especially interesting if you like the Rolling Stones, if you're a fan of the Rolling Stones, because you see so much like live performance of them and like, them recording and just goofing around and stuff, and that's really interesting in and of itself. But the actual footage of the concert is mind-blowing, and they actually capture on film the moment where the man gets stabbed, and he did pass away from his injuries. Really kind of like famous night in late 60s history, and definitely something that is really, really interesting to me, because the 60s, like the late 60s, early 70s is my favourite period of history. So if like me you are just kind of like a little bit nostalgic for that time period, then it's interesting, but also, like I said, just like interesting for the history of music and the history of popular culture as well. Slightly different style from the rest of the documentaries I've talked about, but it's visually very beautiful and, like I said, extremely interesting. So those are my top 5/6 documentary film recommendations. If you have any recommendations for documentaries that you really like, then please leave them down in the comments. I could have talked about a million more because I really love documentary films and I just love browsing the documentary tab on Netflix. Let me know down in the comments what other kinds of videos you'd like to see from my channel in the future, because I want to mix things up a bit and I'm definitely interested in taking your guys' requests. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram or Facebook, they will all be linked down in the description, along with everything that I'm wearing and what's on my face right now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!